Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session to discuss the landscape of higher education in UK and possibilities of linkages between UK and India. Over the years, we've seen a sustained increase in the interest in international universities. More and more Indian students are now studying abroad at the undergraduate level. In 2019, about 783,000 Indian students were studying in different parts of the world. In this session, we're going to explore the reasons contributing to this shift. We will try to understand what students are looking for from institutions abroad and what kind of opportunities these institutions offer. We're joined by eminent educationists in India, General Kulkarni, Director, Mayo College, Ajmer, uh, Siddharth Singh, Director, Emerald Heights International School, Indore, Mirza Mujic from University of Nottingham, Trent Bridge, UK, and Neil Austin from University of Stirling, UK. Gentlemen, I would love you to introduce your institutions briefly, although many of our viewers may be aware of your colleges and schools, but it'd be great if you could introduce yourselves briefly. General Kulkarni.
Thank you, Manit. I am Director of Mayo College in Ajmer, set up in 1875. And well, in those days, the Viceroy said he's setting up the Eton of the East. Since it's a UK seminar, I thought I'd make a mention of that. So we're an all-boys residential school. We also have an all-girls residential school. And we have a day school for our local children. Thank you.
Siddharth, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Siddharth Singh. I'm the director at Emerald Heights International School, Indore. And we are a day-come boarding school with 4,000 students studying. And I look forward to interacting with everyone during this webinar. Thank you.
Neil, perhaps a little bit more about your institutions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Manit. Hi, everyone. My name is Neil Austin. I'm the head of international recruitment at the University of Stirling. I've worked for Stirling for almost the past 2 years. Prior to that, I was head of South Asia at Edinburgh Napier University, so worked in South Asia for a long time. The University of Stirling, we are 14,000 students. Based in Scotland. We're a top 30 UK university, based partly between Edinburgh and Glasgow. We were established in the 1960s, and we've recently been voted the 5th most beautiful campus in the world, as you can maybe see from my backdrop. And our specialists tend to be around about business education and media, as well as sport.
Thank you, Neil. Mirza.
Good evening to everyone watching in India. So my name is Mirza. I'm the Senior Regional Manager for South Asia at Nottingham Trent University. So I've been lucky enough to be involved with students and applicants from South Asia for around 9 years at Nottingham Trent University now. So I am looking forward to this discussion very much so. In terms of the university itself, we're one of the largest universities in the UK, especially in terms of undergraduate numbers. We're one of the most popular for undergraduates. So we have around 32,000 students. And that means that we also offer quite a range of courses, very diverse, anything from art and design to science and business and so on. And I am really lucky to work at a university that's also one of the top 10 most popular universities in India in terms of student numbers. So this certainly is a topic that's very close to my heart.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and thank you to Ravi from ScooNews and Aritra from One Step for organizing this event. This is indeed a very, very interesting and hot topic. In fact, in the last year, the number of students going to UK increased by about 93%. a whopping 93%. So, General Kulkarni, we're seeing this increased interest. What are some of the trends that you're seeing on the ground? This is statistics, of course. What do you see happening with students at Mayo? Are you seeing preferences changing over the years? Are you seeing them maybe not as interested in Indian universities or more interested in universities abroad? And what might be some factors that are contributing to these trends?
Uh, Firstly, in our case, for us, it's a natural phenomenon for our students to be interested in universities in the UK, because since our school was set up by the British, we've had very long and historical links with many of the universities and colleges. Uh, our, During school days, our students from their young age have exchanges and visits to various schools in the UK, and this goes on till their graduating year from school. So there is a natural bond to go there. The second thing as to why there's an increased interest in foreign universities in general is an aspirational thing. In recent years, they've heard about the success stories of many of people of Indian origin going on to become CEOs of very large companies or holding, very glamorous positions. So it's an aspirational thing, though there's no correlation between my going there and becoming a Satya Nadella, so to speak. But there is a feeling that yes, this is perhaps a ticket to betterment. The other thing is that overall in the country, the spending capacity of parents has gone up, collectively. So there's a greater segment which can afford undergrad education abroad. Then there is this issue in certain universities, bent of mind, find it difficult unless they are, focused entirely on academics. There is also a feeling that the universities abroad are more skills oriented and problem solving oriented and seem to have relevance to future businesses or future careers. They also feel that for their own business, many of our students come from business families, they feel that they can bring back best practices which can be brought to improve upon family owned traditional businesses with the latest that is happening in the world. So these are some of the things I think I'll leave some things for Siddharth to also add on to this.
Right.
So yeah, so I think I agree with whatever General Kulkarni has said, and I would just like to add from a school which is from various factors, as General Kulkarni just said, that we have enhanced capacity of paying, and that's why India becomes the second largest market for international students after China. And also, I feel that the disconnect of universities with high schools in India is growing day by day. Just to give you an example, you can get into an IIT or you can become a doctor without worrying about your school grades. You can go to a dummy school and go to coaching that Indians famously do and get into these colleges. So that's an unfair disadvantage to the students who are regular students of any school. It can be an IB school, a CBSE, or an ICSE school. So I think that disconnect is definitely there, and there is no holistic way of selecting students. And that's why I feel more and more students are applying abroad and looking at different colleges at undergraduate level. Indians were more inclined towards going for their graduation before, but in the last few years, that trend is changing towards undergraduate education. And I think what I hear from Manit is that there is a 93% uptick in students applying to UK. So that's a very welcome trend, because even for international education, the competition is very high from United States, from Canada, from Australia. And all these countries are being very aggressive in India. And I think that UK it makes more sense for Indian students because of the convenience, the travel, and the connect that in the education system, because the system of education is very similar to what we have here in India. I also feel that the opportunity of doing research-based courses, to actually being able to do internships and actually being able to interact with students from across the globe is a big interest for Indian students. In India, unfortunately, we lack globally benchmarked universities and a more global culture, locally. So I think these are some of the reasons, in addition to what General Kulkarni has said, that is attracting Indian students to think about educating abroad.
So clearly, as you're both mentioning, that we are seeing this trend even in smaller towns. People are shifting towards foreign universities, and the reasons it seems are that there's just too much competition for good colleges within India. B, there's also a gap in what is being taught right now. We're probably not shifting our curriculum fast enough, and some of these gaps are showing up in the unemployability studies in the country, where one of these studies that I was recently reading said 93% of engineers in India are unemployable. So somewhere there is this whole culture of not necessarily focusing on skills, barring some of the good universities, but actually focusing still on rote and preparing for examinations and writing that one exam or two exams at the end of every year. And with the opportunities that universities abroad are providing, and with incomes increasing and these becoming more affordable, more and more kids are beginning to make the shift. Just to add, the session is now being streamed live because Zoom has a certain limit of people that we can take. So the link is visible to you, possibly is also available in the chat. If you wanted to send it out to somebody, please do that right now. So Neil, why don't you tell us something about the landscape of higher education in UK currently? What's the size? What are some of the developments? What is the direction that you all are taking right now?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, in the broadest sense, so the UK is, it's a sector of 140 different institutions. You can broadly split those into three different groups. Just for the audience, so there are the ancient universities, so that's your Oxford and your Cambridge, but also St Andrews and Glasgow, and the ones that have existed for over 200 years. So that's the kind of traditional group of institutions. You then have a set of institutions called, which we group as the plate glass institutions, which Stirling is part of, but also universities like Warwick and Nottingham, and they were tended to be created in the 1960s to deal with sort of post-war jobs creation. So that's the next group. And then finally, there's a group of modern universities that were all created around about 1992. And that's added more capacity to the sector. So across those 440 institutions, you have these three different groupings. And one of the things I think I'd be quite keen to get across today is there's a lot of difference between those institutions in terms of what their specialisms are and what the student experiences can be. It's not are really clear, the oldest ones are the best and the newest ones, are lower ranked. But there's a lot of movement between these different groups in terms of particular specialisms. And when you look at sort of latest rankings, some of the more modern institutions and some of this plate glass institutions from the 60s perform really well in some particular areas. So there's a lot of different experiences across all those different institutions. In general, I mean, I suppose what you're finding, just to touch on a point that Siddharth picked up on, is it is less rote learning and it is a lot more about skills development. And in my experience working with Indian students for the last 10 years, that probably is one of the sort of larger challenges in terms of learning styles. And if you're an Indian student coming to do a master's program for 1 year, then to undertake that shift in learning style can be quite a challenge because it is quite different from what they're used to at bachelor level. Whereas students who come in at an undergraduate level obviously have a lot longer time to be able to acclimatise to that different way of teaching. I think quite often students are surprised how little sort of face-to-face class time they maybe have in their first semester compared to what they would be used to in India. So it is a tendency towards a lot more self-study, a lot more teamwork, project work, but all designed to develop skills that employers are looking for, rather than just, you know, as you say, the rote learning side of things. In general, across the sector as well, you know, there's massive variety in terms of provision and massive specialisation from quite an early stage that maybe is something that you don't see as much of in India. So, you know, we have over 200 undergraduate programs and various combinations of different disciplines, rather than really clear streams, you know, business or medicine or engineering. I think there's lots of different combinations. And one of the things that struck out for me recently, I was at a presentation and somebody came up with a quote that 10 years ago, or the top 10 in-demand jobs now did not exist 10 years ago. So I think it's almost trying to future-proof your careers and making sure that there's enough variety within the curriculum that graduates are flexible going forward in terms of their careers, hence the sort of sheer level of offering that we have.
Thank you, Neil. Mirza, do you want to add something to that?
No, I mean, I'd certainly agree with Neil in the fact that you know, there is so much variety in the UK, and that's the important thing. But that's one thing that I have seen students looking for more and more in India over the years, and that's you know, a refreshing thing to see. That I think previously, certainly when I perhaps first started coming out to India, one thing that was quite common is that students would, and as Neil mentioned, would purely look at, you know, just the simplest kind of broad rankings, and they would feel that would be the best way to see which university is the best fit for them. But I think we have moved away from that, and students are now looking at the more specific rankings in a bit more detail, and looking at the kind of the all-round qualities of the university, and also focusing on what they are interested in more specifically. So whether that's, you know, looking to get into a job or going into research in the future, or you know, whatever their end goal is, I think that certainly helps them make the right choice.
Right. So, so Neil, thank you for sharing what you did. I think particularly, and with what Mirza is also saying, one of the challenges has been around familiarity of universities. And in India, you've heard a lot of the ancient and legacy institutions' names, and people would generally be pushing for them, and anything that is coming from the 60s or 90s, they're still not familiar with. I think we're still not making the connection that Stanford is as good as Harvard, and possibly discounting some of the new universities a little bit. So, General Kulkarni and Siddharth, I want to understand, when students are looking at universities abroad, what are some of the factors they keep in mind? And are you having to deal with some of these myths that they're going to purely go by the prestige factor, or rankings, or are you seeing you know, some objective factors that they keep into mind while making these decisions?
Well, first and foremost, the brand factor does have an impact, as you mentioned, Harvard or Stanford or whatever. Definitely that has an impact, undoubtedly. And then, of course, you know, terms like the Ivy League, etc., have an impact. But these are a handful of universities or colleges. But beyond that, I think there's a much greater understanding, and we make our students understand that they must look for subjects of their choice, in which universities have faculties which have good faculty in that subject, because the name of the university, say, may not match Harvard, but you may have a faculty which is exceptionally good in some subject. Then the other thing that people are looking for, some of the students are still uncertain when they actually apply and go to a foreign university, and they want to have, if possible, the freedom and flexibility to cherry pick after having gone there and readjust the majors they want to do. Now, in this respect, it has been seen that universities in UK are little less flexible than some of the other places. So this impacts on their decision making. The other thing is that certain universities, or at least schools like ours, we look for universities which give weightage to extracurricular activities, sporting activities, etc. So those universities who confine themselves largely either to a narrow academic profile, or maybe at best a community service profile added to it, often are found low on the list of priorities of our children, that they would like to have this. And once again, we find that certain places like in the US, Canada, and in the Far East, there are universities who are increasingly looking for our students with these additional talents, multi-skilled talents beyond the academics. And of course, the other concern is that there is no real interactive process with the government universities in India. The private universities do have a system of interaction like foreign universities, but government universities have no systemic, thing in place in which students can interact with them and find out and where to go, and etc., etc. And finally, the point I wish to make is that having gone abroad to a university, if the student has a good experience, and I mean academic experience and a social and cultural experience, it results in kind of a pipeline. He then tells his younger guys in school, "Hey guys, I am at this university. This is great. This is good. I recommend you come for this reason." So over a period of time, at times we find that sort of a funneling takes place, and children tend to go to certain colleges or certain universities in larger numbers than they do to others. Yes. Over to you, Siddharth.
I think, very frankly, I'll give you an example. If you would have asked me this question 6 or 7 years back, I would have said that if you don't get into the top 50, don't go. This is what I used to tell my students, and that was very unfortunate because being from where we are, we still have less than 1% schools who actually have a counselor to help students with their career choices. But obviously, that we are trying to change that. And today we have almost 2 full-time counselors working specifically for guiding the students for their careers. So what happens initially, the Indian mindset is very, percentage oriented, very ranking oriented. And now what we try and explain parents that it's not about the rankings, about what kind of course they're going to do, what kind of research facilities available, who is teaching that course, and what kind of placements does the university have. So for example, we are, I'm sure that in India, very few people know about small liberal arts colleges. In US, for example, Harvey Mudd, Colgate, Vanderbilt. These names are very famous in the US and have very good placements, but in India, very few people know these colleges. So what happens? We have to, teach Indian kids to kind of how to choose the university, because we come from a country, we are very obsessed with 100% cutoffs. What is your rank? Are you ranked number one in IIT Advanced? All that. So moving that mindset away from that and then taking it to a more holistic, a more comprehensive selection process is difficult, but that's definitely coming into picture. And today, I'm very happy to say that more and more students are choosing universities by looking beyond what they're ranked. So I think that change is coming in, but definitely, but overall, if you look at the whole country, it's going to take some time. And I'm sure that still students are obsessed with rankings.
Right. Absolutely. I think a very good point. While this seems to be expanding the criterion, but it's still not happening at the pace that it should. And we're discounting several really good universities. You took names of some brilliant colleges, and I know that Harvey Mudd on pay scale in the US is the highest paying college, and most Indians applying abroad would not even know that. It pays more than MIT and Caltech. And likewise, I mean, great universities like Nottingham, Trent and Stirling are still not becoming as visible to Indian students, and there's so many examples in UK and across the globe, actually. Uh, it is our responsibility to make students aware of factors beyond just rankings. Tell me, Siddharth, I'll just ask you to continue. sharing what you think some of the primary concerns are of students. Like even in our own school, I still find about half the parents absolutely not open to sending their kids out at the undergrad level, even though most of them can afford it. There's still these reservations. What might be some factors that play in here?
See, if we talk about reservation, I still fight with parents to send kids to Bombay and Delhi. So sending them to UK and US, that's a different ball game altogether. But I'm fighting the fight, and I'm this year I think we sent around 30, 40 kids to universities in the UK and US and Canada. So what happens? The parents are worried. They are worried for various factors. One thing, it's the cost. Cost plays a very important factor, especially in Indore, where we have parents who can afford it, but majority cannot afford that kind of expense for the university. So we definitely, the kids look at scholarships. They really want to apply for scholarships, and if they get it, they would definitely go. Then second is their safety, their security, and the kind of support that's available for them, because some parents have no family, they have no one in that particular country, and that's a matter of concern, because what if the child is not well? What if? So all these questions, we have to answer for them. And also, what about after they graduate? Because will they? What is the immigration process? What is the visa process? Can they work? Is it different for the liberal arts courses? Is it different for STEM courses? And a very important factor, I feel, in India now is that a lot of Indian kids want to come back to India after the education and work here. So the lack of recognition of their university in their home country, so this has to be analyzed. The parents also think about that okay, he goes to university XYZ, and then he comes back to India, and is XYZ known in India? Will he get a good job back home? Will he able to continue, if he wants to do his masters in India, for example? Will he able to kind of apply to universities in India? So all these are very pertinent questions that parents ask us, and we have to answer them.
What are you seeing, General Kulkarni?
Yeah, I mean, Siddharth made some very pertinent points. There is also the social thing about, in India, this over-parenting, that my kid isn't grown up enough to be let loose on his own, which is changing, but somehow at the back of the mind, it does play. But I'm happy to say that in our case, I think there is a great desire for going abroad. And even on routine, like I said, exchanges, visits, competitions, they're very keen to go. So I never have any shortage of volunteers if I say there's anything happening overseas or any other place. But as I told you, some of the inhibitions which come about are based on this gap that needs to be bridged between the universities and the schools. And as Siddharth says, all the uh, major schools today have a strong counseling department. They are in touch. For example, in our school, every year we run a major career fair in which we get, we get more than one university per student. It has become that way to call it off. But eventually, we're having a large number of webinars today, one-on-one by a university with our students, so that specific questions can be answered. So I think there's a need for this mentoring process to be established if a university really wants our students to come there, right? That's one. Two, the school counselors and the admission officers or admission counselors of the universities need to have a two-way communication open on a regular basis. Three, that our students need to be made to feel comfortable that the transition from K-12 to so-called K-13 will be seamless, right? And the admission process needs to be completed before the admission process in Indian universities kicks off in a big way. Because then people say it's better to have one bird in the hand than many in the bush. So these are some of the concerns. There are many others, but these are major ones.
Around safety also, General Kulkarni, there's around safety, possibility of discrimination. Sometimes you do have students responding, particularly some specific areas in some countries. Of course, you can use much beyond that now in most parts. So, Mirza, how are the universities in UK? How is the system responding to some of these factors that have been spoken about, particularly with regards to visas, placement opportunities, the whole factor on value for money, because that's extremely important for the Indian parent.
Yeah, well, I think if I can kind of start off just by touching upon the safety point, I think that the one thing that's certainly important to recognise is the historic connections between India and the UK, and the fact that obviously the UK already has a very large British Indian population. So I think certainly in terms of safety or discrimination towards students who might be coming in from India, I would say that's from my experience anyway, certainly not an issue, because in all cities in the UK, students will be coming into already existing British Indian populations. I know a lot of our Indian students, when they arrive, we normally have a welcome event where we introduce them to the local British Indian community, so that they can get help with part-time work, different things like that. And also have somewhere to go and celebrate Diwali, Navrati, Sham, whatever it may be. So I think all universities will have those connections. They'll use them. So certainly safety, when coming to a country that already has such a diverse population anyway, isn't really an issue. In terms of the other points, in terms of what UK universities are doing about all the kind of extra things that students are now looking for, well, I mean, I would probably say that we've been doing that for some time, for many years already, and even before the kind of large numbers of international students started coming into the UK universities were already doing that in order to attract our own students, really. UK students obviously have the advantage of going to open days at universities and visiting campuses and seeing what they're like, getting a feel for the city. And so I think all universities ensure that all those offerings are there so that students can see them, so that they can get a taste of them on campus. And so we've again, it's something that we've had established for a long time. This isn't new to us. So it's something we are strong at as a sector. Certainly for us as a university, I mean, Nottingham Trent University, as an example, is you mentioned careers. We're a university that's very much focused on those skills. So we have got one of the largest employability teams in the UK, which then helps students throughout their study, improve their CVs, get those extra skills that they'll need for work, assist them with applying and finding jobs part-time during their studies if they wish to do so, assist them with applying for internships in kind of their industry that they want to go into so that they can get a taste of that, and then also supports them as alumni with looking for jobs after they graduate and so on. So that's just an example of those extra offerings. Employability isn't just one thing. We also have accommodation supports, mental health support. We have international student support specifically to help students with, queries around visas, whatever it may be. So I think that's something that UK universities are very good at. It is a holistic approach for us and has been for many years. And so I think, with Indian students starting to look for those things more and more, that will certainly, I think, enable the UK to give them an even better offering.
Could you speak a little bit, Neil, about the visas and work permits once they graduate, and what kind of opportunities can they hope for with it?
No problem. One thing I would say is, just to go back to the point that you've just been talking about, these are not specifically Indian concerns either, and over-parenting is not a specifically Indian issue. These are just the natural concerns that parents have sending young children to university. So it is just something that we deal with all the time. And perhaps the onus is on people like myself and Mirza to sort of demystify some of the processes and how different it is, because much like Mirza, in 10 years of working with Indian students in the UK, I've never had one student come to me with a cultural acclimatisation issue or a security concern once they get here. As I say, my experience tends to be more about the academic shift transition than actually about the cultural one. But just to go back to visas, so obviously the number that was quoted earlier was a 93% increase in interest in the UK, and I think, without COVID, we'd expect it to potentially be even higher this year than it was last year. A lot of this does come down to a shift in the UK visa policy. I think that's something that has to be recognised. So what the change has been, for those that are unaware, is any student who graduates from summer of 2021 onwards can qualify for an automatic 2-year stay back option, a post-study work visa, which is something the UK had and was leading the way with 10 years ago. And then
years? Did you say 3 years?
2 years.
Two,
yeah.
Okay.
So 2 years from graduation, whether they are an undergraduate student or a postgraduate student, where they've completed a master's or a bachelor program. So this is a change that comes into place for everyone who graduates after next summer. There is an application process to it, but it looks to be fairly light touch. And you'll forgive us for not having all the details. The visa process actually changed on the 5th of October for incoming students, and I've just been sent a 114-page guidance booklet that I've not had the chance to get through yet. But that is the change. So on graduation, they can stay in the UK for 2 years. They can work for those 2 years, and after that, the challenge is for the student to have used those 2 years wisely, should they want to stay in the UK after that, to move from a post-study work graduate route visa into an employment visa because they have developed that relationship with an employer at that point, or to go into further study, a master's, PhD, whatever. So that has been largely what has driven this shift back to the UK in terms of interest from an Indian population.
So theoretically, actually somebody can study undergrad for 3 years, or in some of the universities where there is a 4-year degree, 4 years, then work for 2 years, do a master's degree, and then again work for 2 years. That is available through the automatic route right now.
I believe that to be the case. It's maybe in my 114 pages that I still have to get through, but that kind of staging isn't something that anyone has any concerns about. I think that's how it's designed to operate.
Right. Great. In terms of careers of the future, and Mirza, you spoke a little bit about that. Is specific work happening, given that we're sitting at the 4th industrial revolution right now? Jobs are changing rapidly in the machine age with artificial intelligence. There is this huge risk of many jobs getting outsourced to machines. What are we doing in preparation? Are there some courses that we're introducing, or strategically in the direction that the university is taking, or the entire higher ed system in the UK is? Are you looking at some reforms or something?
So, I mean, I couldn't quite say for the whole sector, but certainly as a university, one of the things that we always try and be proactive in is introducing courses regularly that reflect what the industry is looking for. So to make our graduates more employable, and that's certainly a focus for us as a university, the employability of our graduates. So as an example, I mean, data science is a course that's been introduced in the last few years and has become hugely popular in India, but we introduced it as soon as we saw a need for it. Another one, which is now a little bit older, but kind of around the time when I started, we were introducing digital marketing as a specific degree, not just as a part of a master's in marketing, for example. And these are responses to what we hear from our industry partners when they're telling us what they look for in people that they employ. So whilst I appreciate that there is this risk of automation, taking jobs away and so on, I do think that the industry will simply adapt, and if machines are doing more of the work, then somebody will need to program those machines and service those machines and so on. So there'll be more jobs in robotics, in AI, in similar courses which will simply come in. But I think, like I said, I can't speak for the sector, but I think most UK universities are very responsive to the needs of the industry. We do regularly go out to our partners and ask for what they're looking for.
Yeah, Manit, if I can come in here.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so because the nature of jobs is changing, and what people train for at undergrad level may not prepare them for one particular career stream of the future. as I mentioned once before, there is a feeling amongst Indian students and counselors that the degree of flexibility of hopping streams or switching even your choice of majors is relatively restricted in the UK. So can either Neil or Mirza shed some light on this? Is there any rethinking of this? Because vis-a-vis certain other parts of the world, their systems seem to be a little more inflexible.
I'm happy to start, and I think Neil will probably have something to add, because this is where the difference between English universities and Scottish universities might be more pronounced. Obviously, degrees in England are 3 years long undergraduate degrees, and therefore are a little bit shorter. So the view of many of our academic staff is that we have to be a bit more prescribed, at least in some of the subjects within that course, if we're going to get the student trained up to the level that they need to be. So I appreciate that for some students that's perhaps not attractive. For other students, the faster the faster route to getting the degree that they want is sometimes the attractive aspect. And I think that's also what UK has been renowned for, that specialism in courses. So I would completely agree with the general that it is a bit different. But I would say that even with English degrees that are 3 years and perhaps a bit more set in what students will study, there is still scope within some of them to do modules in a different field just to get that experience. And if not, a lot of our master's degrees are then conversion degrees. So if a student does let's say a engineering bachelor degree, they could then, for example, still do a master's in psychology, because that's a conversion degree. So it allows them to look at one field as a kind of perhaps more of a career choice, and then another field which they would perhaps either like to use in their industry or as a personal interest as well. So there are different options. But in general, UG degrees in the UK are, whilst they might be kind of very prescribed, the experience that students get will certainly serve them all round. And I just want to use the example of one of our famous alumni in India, Varun Dhawan. So he actually did a business degree at our university, and then of course went into acting. But I think always says that the experiences he gained whilst living and studying in the UK are the things that have helped him be a success in that. But I'll pass it on to Neil to talk about Scottish degrees.
Yeah, thanks, Mirza. Probably it's just worth getting across for the audience that the key point of difference between institutions based in Scotland and institutions based in England is that the Scottish degree is a 4-year bachelor degree and has always been. So it is slightly different. It's because our students don't do A-levels. The Scottish students do a slightly different, similar to Year 12 system. So there is a little bit more breadth in the first couple of years of a Scottish degree. They still come out with the same award titles, so that doesn't change. And there is it's possible for a student to start a particular program, realise that maybe he likes aspects of it and wants to shift from a business management to an economics or a marketing or human resources or something within a particular school or faculty. That isn't too difficult as long as that decision is made early enough. There's a visa implication to this. So students are sponsored for a particular exit award. So if a student does decide to make that shift, if it's academically suitable after 1 or 2 years of study, we do need to advise the Home Office that there's a change to their visa and this kind of thing. But that's administratively quite straightforward to do. But it's not the US system. It's not you can take different things across a whole suite of areas. We do encourage students to have breadth. So, you can do, at Stirling, you can do sports and film. You can combine honours like that. But that's part of the reason we offer so many different combinations from the start to give students that breadth. But we probably do want students to have a really hard think about what they want to do prior to committing, so that the shifts are minimal when they get there. But there should still be breadth within a programme to pick electives from different areas.
So you'd say there is enough space to do some modules and some courses, and like Mirza said, that you can always do something entirely different for your masters that you've not studied at all in the bachelor's. And then there are dual concentrations, there are double majors, there are all those kinds of permutations and combinations that you develop in your wide course range that could offer greater breadth, but the depth is essential in it is seen as an essential element in UK education. Uh, Thank you so much, everyone. That there are a lot of questions lined up here, and I want to just take them one after the other. So the uh, so one is around due to COVID-19. Has there been any impact? Are there lesser parents willing to send their kids? Are you statistically seeing anything, Mirza or Neil?
Well, I think certainly the experience of the sector in the UK has been that the interest in UK education from India hasn't diminished regardless of COVID. So I think the parents and the students are probably aware that obviously COVID isn't going to be a quick fix, and so taking a year or two out until perhaps it's all resolved doesn't make sense for everybody. So we've not seen a reduction in interest, and in fact, particularly because we're talking about schools and undergraduate students, I would mention our undergraduate intake seems to have doubled this year in terms of numbers from India. So it's a significant increase.
Mirza, if you're comfortable sharing, what is the number of students you are taking from India, roughly, a ballpark?
You mean in total or undergraduate?
Undergrad.
Undergraduate. So this year we've got around 95 students.
Wow, that's a large number. Great. Neil, so what are you seeing? Are you seeing any downward trends because of COVID?
No, I would share exactly the experience that Mirza's had. We've been pleasantly surprised by how robust recruitment from India has remained over the last few months. It's been a particularly challenging year, and I think we've seen reduction and reluctance to commit from other parts of the world, but that has not been reflected in India. And again, we're the same. We're probably expecting about a 50% increase in our undergraduate numbers and a 2-3 times increase in our postgraduate numbers from India this year. As opposed to last.
So I'm going to do a very quick fire kind of round on these questions because there are, I believe, 15 odd questions. So with admission cutoffs to most public sector universities in India touching 100%, that's what happened recently. We had universities that were seeking full marks across all subjects. What are UK higher education institutions doing to attract brilliant Indian students who cannot find a place in the universities of their choice? So there's this huge pool of really bright people who are having to go to seriously substandard colleges because there are just that many seats in good colleges. So the question is, what are they doing to attract? I would say we're running this session and we're we're informing people about opportunities beyond India. And I can tell you at some level, it is painful for me as an Indian educator to see so many students wanting to go out, but I care deeply about their future. And I don't see how some of the universities in the country that are becoming absolutely irrelevant, and possibly General Kulkarni and Siddharth would agree, we might reach a situation in another 10 years that good government universities are also seen as good government schools are seen today if they don't change with the times. And we know with large bureaucratic systems, it is not easy to make the shift. It's far easier to make the shift in private institutions, and private institutions in the country also in the last 3 decades, we had a mushrooming of several not so great quality institutions, and which is not to say that there isn't a revival. There are now some really good universities, some really good private universities that have come up in the last 5 or 7 years, and we'll see the trend moving, but the gap is huge. The demand supply gap is humongous. So by when would a UK immigration open its borders for students? Are the borders closed right now? I'm wondering.
No, we're open. Normally, the process is 3 months prior to a course starting, as a student can commit for their visa application process, and start that process now. But yeah, we have Indian students joining us on a day-to-day basis at the moment.
Also, from our institutions, I haven't heard anybody's visas getting rejected for UK off yet. We've had many students going to UK this year. A specific question to Neil. My daughter is now in Standard 9 IGCSE, Cambridge, in a school in South India. She wants to do her undergrad in Oxford University. When should they start working on the admission process?
I'm not sure I can speak on behalf of Oxford specifically, but she's still got plenty of time, given that she's still in Standard 9. I do think for those particular institutions, it's extremely competitive, and you probably are thinking about it a year ahead of where you would think about other institutions. So probably from year 11 onwards, at least.
So we recently had a session with Oxford and Cambridge University. I was talking to the representatives from there. I was very pleasantly surprised to learn that last year the acceptance rate for Indian students was 25% at Cambridge University. They only had 100 students applying. So there's also this huge myth that, I mean, they're very, very competitive. Of course, they've got students from around the globe applying, but it's not impossible to get in. I would say focus on your child's education right now. Many of the universities in UK are very, very focused on academic performance. And if you're looking at depth in subjects, which is part of their core philosophy as opposed to the US, then they would look at excellence in academics. So have your child focus on that. And there's nothing specific that you need to do right now. There is a huge potential for leveraging technology on the lines of the Pan-African network, wherein 54 countries in Africa were connecting some of the leading universities of India. Are there any plans of using up a similar setup for India and UK collaboration, which ensures that the same faculty can be used for remote classrooms?
Yeah, Manit, can I come in there?
Yeah, sir, absolutely.
This example of Africa is not really, directly correlated to what we're discussing. In Africa, the problem was the lack of adequately qualified professional experts, and there was a delivery issue. So what they did was they made this consortium, and they got the top professors from various universities to pull in and conduct classes remotely. It's more on the lines of MOOCs and all that.
Yeah.
So this is not a sort of a one-on-one kind of thing. But one trend I just want to quickly highlight, that this growing interest of studying abroad has also got a linkage, and Siddharth may bear me out, with an increasing demand for international curricula in India. People want to go beyond the national board curricula and want to have things like the CIE, what you call Cambridge or IB and stuff like that, because they feel that is the pipeline, which gets you on your way to going abroad. So if Siddharth has something to say, you may please.
Actually, we had a very interesting discussion. A couple of years back, we hosted Stanford, Columbia, and UPenn for the first time in the city, Indore, because they don't generally travel to Indore. So I had this interesting conversation with them about curriculums. I said, do you give any special preference to CIE, to IB, to CBSE, to ICSE? And their answer was very simple, that absolutely not. We look at how the child has challenged himself or herself in the given curriculum they are in. It doesn't matter what curriculum they're doing. So that, I think, was a very important part, because in India there is a misconception that if you want to go abroad, you have to do some kind of international board. So I would actually like to hear from the universities we have here today, that do you give preference to international curriculums like Cambridge or IB over Indian curriculum like CBSE or ICSE or state boards?
I'm happy to answer that one. So I think certainly for us, we wouldn't differentiate between them. Obviously, we would have entry requirements set for each of the different boards, but we would never say no to a Indian CBSE student because we're looking to get more IB students in. You know, we recognize the quality of all of them in their own respective ways. And actually, for us, the majority of our Indian undergraduates would probably be from CBSE and state boards rather than IB or A levels.
Mm-hmm. Right. So that is, I think, still a very controversial question, I would say, Siddharth. I've heard different versions from different universities, and I know admission offices mostly are welcoming students, but from across boards. But yes, it does matter as to how they're performing within those boards and whether they've challenged themselves. Did they take, if they're doing an IB, for instance, what high-level courses did they take? If they're doing AP, what is the situation? In CBSE, are they challenging themselves? Some of those things become very relevant. So I'll move to the next question. This is somebody who passed out of St. Andrews, is now a head of primary at King's College, India, which is a school. I love Stirling University and been there many times. How many Indians do you have at Stirling?
At the moment, we have probably about 200 Indian students in our population. They're 85% postgraduates, but as an institution, we're less mature in India than places like Nottingham, so we're just the start of our journey.
Right. But if the question is directed towards a large enough Indian community, yes, that answer is yes. And I think I'll add what Mirza said earlier. Many parents have these concerns about safety. Will my child fit in culturally? And I think they've clarified that that's absolutely a non-issue. They've not had students facing any problems on those counts. From Ms. Neelam Modi, according to the new education policy, vocational training should be part of school. So do UK schools have vocational training? What's the policy there? Are you aware of that?
So again, I'm happy to kind of jump in. In terms of vocational training, when we say schools, you mean universities or
I think not school. So I think Ravi is answering this question live. So I'll Ravi to answer that. Okay. Okay. So one interesting question, how to know that the university abroad is affiliated or registered like we have in India? So yes, that's a very important question. So what is the kind of affiliation, accreditation that people should look for when they're applying to a university in UK, just to make sure that they're not landing up in a place that might not be credible?
Yeah, I mean, I can take that one on. It's actually very straightforward when it comes to the UK. All the institutions, all the higher education institutions are government affiliated. We don't have the separation in the way that some countries do. So if you are a recognised UK university, then there's no issues at all there. One of the sort of things that students maybe should look for is accreditations for courses. So whether you become, a chartered engineer or a chartered financial advisor, all the courses often include industry accreditations alongside the university one, and I think that's a really increasingly important decision-making point for a prospective student if they're weighing up two different options, looking at what universities have in particular industry accreditation for the relevant courses.
So what is some accrediting agencies that they can look at and say, okay, this must be a credible university?
Or something like, for us, the big one is our CFA, so Chartered Financial Analyst. So if you graduate from one of our finance courses, you would get that as part of it as well. There's things like CIPD, so Institute of Personal Development for HRM courses. There's CEng for some engineering courses as well, but there's a whole variety.
Neil, you're talking at the course level. Is there something at the university level? Is there a stamp apart from the government affiliation, a kind of an accreditation or something, or it happens for courses?
Yeah, nothing at the level of a kind of accreditation, I would say. You're then talking in the realms of things like sort of rankings and independent bodies like QS and Times Higher, and who make their own assessments that can be looked at an institutional level. But there's nothing that separates an ancient university,
All right.
in Oxford case, from modern institution. They're all equally recognised.
Great, thanks. Mr. Trivedi here wants to hear about scholarships at your universities.
I'll start. So yeah, I think again, all UK universities pretty much will have different offerings with scholarships, but we'll certainly have scholarships at both undergraduate and postgraduate level. The thing that may vary is that some universities might have kind of more automatic scholarships for students that are then successful in getting a place. Other universities might have cutoffs purely based on grades. Some universities will have purely sports focused scholarships. So it just depends on the university. I mean, our example is that we ask all students applying for our scholarships, and whether that's at undergraduate or postgraduate level, and we're talking about kind of several £1,000s of each year's tuition fees if they're successful. But we ask all students to complete an application form where they write 3 mini essays telling us more about them, because we as an institution look for well-rounded students. So we don't have just a simple grade cutoff point. It's about looking at the all-round picture of the individual and how many extracurriculars they get involved in. Do they do any social work? Any kind of interesting hobbies that they have. So yeah, all-round picture.
Mm-hmm. Neil?
Yeah, very similar. And I think this is one of the key differentiators between institutions, not just the level of scholarship available, but also the actual fee level. So, you're probably talking about ranging from £12,000 up to £30,000 per year, depending on which institution you choose. So you should always see scholarships in relation to what the actual fee of the institution is at the first place. One thing to be aware of in terms of sort of full scholarship programs, they are few and far between for undergraduate students, because obviously it's easier to discount a full postgraduate course. In terms of the big government schemes, tend to be more focused towards master's students, whereas undergraduate tends to be more like a discounting, whether that's academic. We have a £2,000 a year scholarship, but in terms of full scholarship, it does tend to be more for master's students.
Right. Could you say something about the cost of education in your respective colleges? And generally, is there like a ballpark, which is an average per annum expense?
Yeah, I mean, for us anyway, the undergraduate courses range between £15,000 and £18,000 per year. Obviously, it's a 4-year programme, so that's what we're currently looking at. Particularly academic students can enter straight into year 2. So if they do well, they get sort of 75-80% in their exams. We can look at them as a year 2 entrant. So that would reduce the overall cost from 4 years to 3. On top of that, there's an amount that the UK government will look for when you apply for your visa to prove that you have the maintenance to study in the UK for a year, and that comes in at about £10,000 a year. So that's what it is for us. And that £10,000 is pretty average, other than anywhere outside of London, it tends to be that amount.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll mention that our fees are very similar, around the 15,000 mark. Yeah,
around the 15,000 mark. And what about housing and all? Do your universities provide housing or support in finding housing?
Yeah, both. I think I mentioned earlier, we all have accommodation teams that will support students in finding housing. We also work with organizations in India that help students find that housing as well. So they have somebody that they can contact in Delhi or in Mumbai and so on. So there is that assistance specifically for our Indian cohort that we offer. But again, all UK universities, because of how long we've been doing this, and the fact that students do look for student halls on campus and so on, all UK universities tend to have that offering. So we'll have 5 or 6 halls on our campus itself, and then maybe 10 or 15 which are either owned by us or our partner providers in the private sector. But again, I know for Indian parents that can sometimes be a scary word. The same safety aspects, because they are our partners, and they would all be within 5 or 10 minutes walk of the campus. So the offering is there.
Of accommodation on and off campus, which is of a similar kind in a safe environment. And what might be some of the cost? Like you said, £15,000 is the cost for education. Would you say another 15 for accommodation, living expenses, the extras and all, or?
No, not at all. As Neil said, I think for most universities outside of London, London accommodation can be a little bit pricier, but outside of London, for most universities, a kind of all-round comfortable living, comfortable standard of living for students would probably cost around the £10,000 per year.
About £10,000 per year. Great. So there's another question around medical insurance in UK for students. Is that is there comprehensive insurance policies available, and are they affordable, or is it covered in the college fees, or how does
Neil,
it?
I don't know if Neil wanted to jump in with that one. Or?
Well, there is a health surcharge that you pay as part of your visa process, and once you pay that, you would then be covered by NHS for your time as a student under that visa. So that's just part of the overall visa application. I don't have the exact amount off the top of my head, Mirza. I don't know if you're aware exactly how much it is.
It's just changed, but I want to say £450 per year.
Okay, so you don't have to buy it separately. Great, that's wonderful. So how are the grad courses on architecture in UK? We've seen some good architects out of UK, there's no question. I'd suggest that do your universities offer architecture?
Yes, so we do. And actually, that's one of the things that we actually are quite famous for, because that's the origins of the university. So Nottingham Trent University was set up as a specific government school of design and architecture in 1843. So as Neil mentioned at the beginning, obviously we may be a kind of newer university, but there are certain fields that we would have been doing as specialisms for a lot longer. So architecture is one of those for us, and we are quite well known in that field. I don't know if Neil has any similar courses.
We don't. It's not our area, I'm afraid, in architecture.
Great. Thank you so much, Neil, Mirza, General Kulkarni, Siddharth, Ravi, and Aritra for having the session. It's been great. I think we've really got some flavor of what is happening in the UK right now. It seems like a very exciting destination at this point of time, with the width of courses, with the dynamic approach, university. I think it's definitely a very viable and also reasonably affordable alternative to look at. Thank you so much, General Kulkarni and Siddharth, for sharing your perspective on what Indian students are looking at, on educating all of us about some of the challenges, the criteria, and the factors they have in mind. Wonderful talking to you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.